your sacrifice and what you have done, and the work that you have put in and what you sacrificed of yourself. I will do this thing. But not only will I do this thing, I will increase your powers. Because see, what happened was, as Oshun flew as a peacock to Olodumare, she eventually turned into what we know today to be the vulture, from the heat of the sun and exhaustion. But this was her plea and her sacrifice for humanity, and through this she was granted greater powers. So one can look at this story, and understand a couple things. One, we know when we see vultures mentioned in literature or in our sacred Odu, our mythology, or our stories, we know we're reading about women who are gifted and who have a greater endowment of power and ability from Olodumare. In the Yoruba culture, we call them Iyami or Aje. In Kemetic culture, we would call them the Ujet, or some say the Wajet. Here we call them, in this day and time, witches. All right. But if we look at the power and the energy of Oshun, who also represents the power of love, who also represents the power of knowledge, we could say that Oshun / love / knowledge is the greatest way to deification. But the journey may cause one to transform into someone who loses the trappings of materialism and vanity. And these things are synonymous with the human experience. See, the peacock is vain. The peacock is beautiful to the physical eye. But Oshun reminds us that true beauty emanates from an unseen place. Any beauty that you really think emanates or originates in the physical realm is nothing but an illusion. Even when you look at a lake, or you look at a sunset, or you look at a canyon or a bird, or anything that you consider to be beautiful and elegant in nature, it's always important to remember that what you're looking at is an illusion. You're not looking at a beautiful lake. You're not looking at a beautiful sunset. You're looking at a reflected hologram of the real beautiful sunset, of the real beautiful lake. That's where we get Oshun's mirror. She reminds us that what we live in is a holographic universe. Energies in love, energies in commonality. Okay, the concept of love, right? Which is always a difficult one when you ask people what love is, because there's many forms, different forms of love. I would even suggest, to use the word Oshun in place of the word love. I think by saying I Oshun this, or I Oshun you, or I'm in Oshun, you can better understand or understand the energy that you're working with yourself, as opposed to saying, I love this or I love that, and not really understanding what you're saying when you're saying that word. But for the sake of this particular session, let's say that love is the divine intention. And what I mean by that, love can be what the divine or what the supreme being intends for a person, or for a season, or for a situation. So that could be love intends for two people to join. Love may intend for a tornado. Love may intend for a hurricane. Love may intend for the tsunami we're undergoing right now in parts of the planet. These are all acts of love, believe it or not, because this is divine intention. Oshun reminds us that the consciousness of the elevated and ascended ones is a powerful and ever-flowing force. So if we're so aware, and if we're so conscious, and we're so developed, then one would have to also deduct that anything that happens on the planet, it doesn't necessarily happen haphazardly. It is a product and manifestation of an orchestrated plan by the supreme consciousness of the cosmos. Even the hurricanes, volcanoes, tsunamis, and earthquakes. Okay. So, water also signifies life, of course. Cleansing. Water is something that you can use when you dedicate it or sacrifice the water to Oshun. You can then use it to heal those who are dealing with certain ailments and diseases. And we could go on and on about the water aspects of Oshun, but just remember also water represents a flow. All right, and there's a coolness there. Oshun is a cool Orisha, and all of these Orisha that I'm speaking of, Oshun, Venus, again Aphrodite, Lakshmi, Het Haru, she is what causes atoms to come together, or more so I should say, the molecules within atoms to come together. It's said even that Oshun, being the one who governs over conception, her role is not even to govern over the gestation or the nurturing of that child for those 9 or 10 months, but her role is actually just to bring things together. One of her other aspects or representations is honey, as well as bees, but we'll get to the bees. But the honey, you have to remember, is the nectar of the gods, as we're always told. So the gods need the food, the sustenance, and the sweetness of Oshun to even be able to recognize and enjoy the pleasures of being deities. Oshun is constantly letting us know that life is to be enjoyed, and this is kind of a real deep concept coming from Oshun, because Oshun represents the duality of also the struggles and the pleasures of life at the same time. If you read her stories, even the story of her leaving the earth as a peacock and arriving in Orun, or heaven, or the unseen world, as a vulture. Okay, that's the duality right there. That's, at one point I was this beautiful creature, now I'm this hideous creature. But either way, I still have a mission to perform. If you look at even in the biblical sense, let's say, for those of you who deal with the Christian lore, Oshun, as well as Yemoja, but Oshun can represent Mother Mary, the Virgin, but at the same time, Oshun represents Mary Magdalene, the prostitute. Because in truth, those were actually the same people. They were the reflected halves of one another. So, but Oshun embodies both of them at the same time. Okay, she's the virgin and the prostitute. She's the one who has abundance, and she's the one who suffers from lack. Okay, there's even an Odu where it talks about where Oshun, because she went through money problems, had her children taken away from her by the other Orisha. So any sister or brother who's gone through that and dealt with, the loss of their children for any situations they were dealing in life, even the Orisha can relate to that. But her children were taken away from her, and she went on to prostitute. And she would go to this river every day, and she would cry, and she would cry and cry and cry in the river. And she had only one